found a game that might be below the radar for some. Ico for the PlayStation 2. Ico's a puzzle game, but it's not just the puzzles that make it great. It's the overall environment. You control Ico, a boy with horns, and literally lead a young girl, Yorda, around by the hand. Tsunami gives Ico for the PS2 9 out of 10. Young love with horns.
In 2024, what can anyone say about Fumito Ueda's trilogy of masterpieces? Moreover, why would anyone take the time to examine these games retrospectively? As it turns out, after scouring YouTube full of painstakingly crafted analyses that are worthy of significant praise just for attempting to encapsulate and reflect on some of gaming fandom's most cherished gems, there is a tremendous amount left to say. As for why offering yet another lengthy examination would be relevant 8 years after Ueda's most recent release, the answer is simple. The man ain't finished. This year's Game Awards offered a surprise announcement of Mr. Ueda's fourth game, which doesn't even have a title yet. This video essay will briefly make an amateur analysis of some of the different philosophical extractions as well as moral and loosely theological themes present in each of Team Ico's minimalist interactive dramas. It should be understood that if you have never played the games, this is your spoiler warning. Lastly, as mentioned, there are a ton of videos unpacking Team Ico's and genDesign's games from a variety of perspectives and understandings. I do not disagree with or disregard most, if not all of those videos, not for the sake of being agreeable, but because like any great work, these games resonate in a variety of ways and inspire a breadth of interpretations, which contributes to elevating the status of Ueda's portfolio as true works of art that transcend the reductive categorization of being labeled simply as video games. Also, it should be addressed that while these games can be examined from a philosophical perspective, time and again Ueda maintains that there was no intended meaning. From a 2019 article on caneandrinse.com, interviewer Jay Taylor asked Fumito directly if there were specific works of literature or thinkers that he could name as some of his primary inspirations. Taylor also throws in his own personal correlation of Shadow of the Colossus with Taoist values about respecting the beauty and inherent balance of nature, as well as serving as a cautionary tale of the dangers of man overstepping his boundaries. Taylor continues, "My interpretation of The Last Guardian, on the other hand, is very much centered around Aristotle's views on friendship." Finally, Taylor ends his inquiry with, "Are these the kind of themes you considered during the writing process?" And in typical Fumito Ueda fashion, the game developer provides this response. "This is my personal opinion, but I don't really get conceptions based on expression media like films and novels upon making a video game. Even if I had some kind of themed or philosophical images in mind, I wouldn't cling onto them and rather value the consistency and harmony that are inevitably generated through the game design process itself. This is because I feel that clinging onto a theme is far too inefficient when making a video game. If video game production was to be compared to writing, my thoughts is that it's closer to looking for words to fit in the squares of a crossword puzzle rather than creating sentences with whatever words you like onto a fresh sheet of manuscript paper. Hence, it is still far from reaching the degree of freedom of expression that novels and films have creation-wise. In this respect, I think I'm the type of creator with a designer's perspective rather than that of an author. For anyone looking for some deeper meaning or value of the games, that response may be disillusioning, but it actually serves to emphasize what Ueda's games do so well, and that is to provide an impressionistic allegory of real life that holds so true that philosophical extrapolations can be made. In other words, Team Ico's games share the common thread of featuring characters that are just realistic enough to be relatable and at the same time vague enough to relate to a wider audience of disparate backgrounds, who can then make their own individual interpretations that equally fit the essence of the games. So then, what is the essence of the games according to me? To avoid teasing, yet also entice you, the viewer, to continue this video, my short answer to this question is that the essence of Ueda's games is the power of love and its capacity to compel an individual to acts of good or evil, as well as understanding that in the world of the Uedaverse, where malicious spirits and evil actions persist, an invisible and benevolent God exists, not specifically akin, but most resembling the Christian God of Abraham. At the center of each of Mr. Ueda's games are male protagonists and their relationships with a companion. Iko, which owes its namesake to its playable character, features a boy condemned to a death sentence where he is to live out his short life in a remote and mysterious castle that is a prison for generation after generation of boys born with horns. All of this is revealed in the opening scene, and the player doesn't receive this information through lengthy exposition. Instead, the player is shown Iko being imprisoned in a stone sarcophagus in a massive hall full of an innumerable amount of identical coffins. Just in the first few minutes, the audience is confronted with thoughts of death and confinement that set the backdrop for the entire game, the horrific nature of isolation and the unbearable anguish of desolation. But just as quickly as the game offers despair and unnerving disquiet of fearing a lonesome death, Fumito provides hope. A freak earthquake shakes Iko's sarcophagus loose, and in a remarkable turn of fate, falls and breaks open, thus freeing and sparing the once hopeless boy of certain death. After this twist of destiny, Fumito offers yet another reprieve from loneliness as Iko discovers he is not actually alone in this strange castle. First seeing a vision, the boy then encounters a worrisome shadowy figure locked in a cage suspended high above. Drawing nearer, the obscured figure is revealed to be a young girl who appears to be frail and unthreatening despite her initially foreboding appearance. From this point, the true adventure begins, all without modern expectations of quest, compasses, or any HUD for that matter, not even a tutorial for basic controls. Teen Iko did what every master of storytelling does. They trusted their audience. Immediately, the player knows what to do, as any boy would know what to do if they were trapped in a prison with a caged girl. Help her.
でそういうタイプのゲームっていうのは、大概その画面越しに AI キャラクターとこうコミュニケーションをするタイプのゲームが多かったんですよ。でそれを見て、じゃあ自分のキャラクターが自キャラがその画面の中にいて AI キャラクターと直接的にこうコミュニケートできるようなゲームは面白いんじゃないかっていうふうに思ったのが最初ですね。それとほぼ同時に、そのボーイミーツガールってテーマにして、男の子が女の子を守りながらこうダンジョンをクリアしていくっていうビジュアルも一緒に思いついたというか発想したんですけど。
The brilliance of Iko's game design, as we will observe in all of Mr. Ueda's games, is that the game tells you what to do without telling you what to do, by relying on the player's natural emotional responses. Although Iko's premise is boy meets girl, the stripped down truth is that any type of romance or perceived romantic interest is irrelevant. What is relevant is the player's empathetic response to an encounter with another being who's imprisoned without any possibility of escaping, right after the player themselves had just escaped their own prison and equally dreadful fate. By utilizing the player's natural empathy, they know what must be done. From that point forward, the companionship between Iko and Yorda begins to construct itself, which allows the player to form an attachment to Yorda necessary to advance the game, but more importantly serves as the emotional context for the journey ahead. Once freeing the damsel in distress, the player instantly learns that the two of them are imprisoned with shadow demons that have the singular objective of recapturing the mysterious maiden. Then later, you make the acquaintance of the queen, Yorda's mother, The fiends are so focused that they seem to only attack Iko when necessary to draw him away from Yorda. Again, the player learns what to do based on what is shown rather than directed to do. Moreover, after numerous attacks from the shadowy jailers, the player experiences the fear and anxiety that comes from being separated from Yorda for too long, knowing that at any moment her life is at stake, and losing her means losing the game. At any point in the game that Yorda is successfully captured by the shadow creatures, the player is treated to one of the most unsettling game over screens. Yorda is lost. A shadow consumes the entire world space, and Iko is turned to stone. Early on, the player also learns that Yorda possesses the ability to open mysterious gates found throughout the prison. So if emotional motivation wasn't enough to protect Yorda, the simple fact is that the player needs Yorda. So in the very beginning, the entire game premise is revealed. Protect Yorda and get the hell out of there. It's simple yet legible to the audience. For hours, the game features sprawling puzzles as you traverse the castle's corridors while fending off the demons. As you pull her along and see her body respond to your movements, you at times may find yourself slow your speed so as to not violently jerk her around. This is where Ueda's attention to animation and movement inform the player's emotions. Fumito has an innate understanding of the capacity that movement has to convey information useful to expression. The player becomes so emotionally invested in the relationship between Iko and Yorda that they are moved to be gentle with her despite how you handle Yorda having no effect on the game. You are neither punished or rewarded depending on how you lead Yorda, but why would we care? After all, she's just pixels and code. Because the characters feel so authentic, you care that she exists in this fictional world, and you will do everything you can to ensure that she continues to do so. This care then extends to caring about her artificial comfort that exists only in your mind. Finally, the player's journey arrives at the point of escaping the castle. The gates are opened and a bridge stretches towards freedom. This is the moment you have been waiting for. You desperately want this, but something doesn't feel right. Although you've just conquered the labyrinth of the castle, it all seems suspicious somehow. Nevertheless, you take your best friend's hand and begin your triumphant waltz across the bridge when your worst fears come to be. You and your most cherished companion are at the total mercy of the omnipotent queen. It's at this moment the game declares what was building inside of Iko and the player all throughout the tedious navigation of the oppressive dreamscape, love. As the bridge separates farther and farther, the increasing divide spurs Iko to action and prompts him to choose the unexpected. Instead of abandoning a stranger for his own safety, Iko leaps to certain peril, with the most minuscule bit of hope that he can help her, or at the very least ensure that she doesn't face her fate alone. He'd rather suffer with her than leave as a coward clutching his self-preservation. The hidden mechanic that drives the game forward is the need of a hero that directs Iko to build a habit of acting courageously. When first meeting Yorda, Iko chooses an act of virtue to be charitable and frees the stranger. Yorda is designed to bring out the virtue in Iko. Although he's just a boy, he sees that Yorda is weaker and in need of protection, so his only choice is between condemning a stranger to suffering or choosing courage. For the next few hours leading up to the bridge scene, Iko must choose to be a courageous defender, lest abandoning his new friend to the shadows. Then, at the moment of fight or flight, Iko, who habitually acted virtuously, is free from cowardice and is able to be virtuous through the will of his unencumbered intellect, and freely sacrifices his freedom and safety for the one he loves. It's that moment, in the final act to follow, that players respond to so deeply. From Book 2 of his Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle provides an explanation on how someone becomes virtuous. This then is the case with the virtues also. By doing the acts that we do in our transactions with other men, we become just or unjust. And by doing the acts that we do in the presence of danger and being habituated to feel fear or confidence, we become brave or cowardly. Again, Ueda had no intention of depicting any sort of lesson on philosophy or morality, but like all masterful works, the characters are imbued with such authenticity that real-world examinations of the human condition can be observed. After choosing to jump back to Yorda, thus realizing that you love her, you hang precariously in her frail grip, knowing that you will fall to the abyss of the waters below. She releases you, and you plummet as you helplessly watch her become enveloped by the Queen's dark energy. Here, Fumito lets the player's heart break and feel the bitter sting of defeat and hopelessness. You awaken at the bottom of the castle, and all feels lost, but you know you must fight your way back to find Yorda. Led by virtue, Iko presses on and finds the queen's sword. Iko returns to the chamber where we started our journey and discovers the lifeless stony body of Yorda. Desperately, you, the player fully immersed as the boy with horns, cry out to Yorda, hoping that your call will somehow undo her afflicted state. Your woeful cries go unanswered as your companion remains so still. The demons descend upon you in great numbers when you are struck with a disturbing revelation. The demons you have been fighting so vehemently are the corrupted souls of the generations of boys born with horns before you. All at once, you swing your sword with unrelenting aggression, protecting your stone princess, all the while combating the terrible fate that awaits you if you succumb to your attackers. With every swing, you swing with agonizing contempt. You defeat the demons hoping that Yorda will awaken, but to your quiet horror, still she sleeps. Stairs lower, and realizing there is only one thing left to do, you ascend to the queen's throne room. There in the final battle, battered and beaten, you, the accursed outcast, achieve the impossible and defeat the Queen of Darkness. When hope comes closest to defeat, the virtuous soul ignites.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end, no dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning they. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Before moving on from Iko, it should be addressed that some opinions classify the relationship between Iko and Yorda as a lazy damsel in distress trope. Anita Sarkeesian, in part 2 of her series, Damsel in Distress, Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, infers that Iko lazily implores the classic plot device. Periodically, game developers may attempt to build a more fleshed out relationship or emotional bond between the damseled character and the male protagonist. And the most decidedly patronizing examples, depictions of female vulnerability, are used as an easy way for writers to trigger an emotional reaction in male players. As we discussed in our first episode, when female characters are damseled, their ostensible agency is removed and they're reduced to a state of victimhood. So narratives that frame intimacy, love, or romance as something that blossoms from or hinges upon the disempowerment and victimization of women are extremely troubling because they tend to reinforce the widespread regressive notion that women in vulnerable passive or subordinate positions are somehow desirable because of their powerlessness.
Huh? You alright, Todd?
Yes.
To dismantle this feminist perspective, looking at when Iko first meets Yorda in her powerless state, the player responds to the vulnerability that any being, regardless of gender, would be displaying in the undesirable predicament of being caged. Also, Yorda first appears wrapped in shadows, so her appearance isn't necessarily weak. If anything, the player may feel conflicted and apprehensive to help. Even after freeing her, it takes a long while to feel as though she can be trusted. Because of her introduction, there is an underlying feeling that although she seems harmless enough, there's clearly some dark mystery about her, which there is. Secondly, Sarkeesian isn't totally wrong, but where feminists view a man naturally inclined to want to help a woman in need as something negative and disturbing, a normal person right away understands that dynamic as good and doesn't give it a second thought. The idea that a male figure wanting to help a feminine figure is somehow perverse and diminutive of a woman's dignity is completely disjointed from reality in the objective order of nature. Only a feminist mind obsessed with destroying the masculine and feminine images can twist something so just and good as compassion into something that is evil. I would venture beyond this and argue that if a man didn't feel naturally moved to help a woman in need, then he is detached from his nature and betrays himself.
And that's all I have to say about that.
In the end, as the castle collapses after the queen's defeat, Yorda, with unlocked power, places Iko in a boat and sends him off to safety as she remains in the apocalyptic fall of her prison. The credits roll and a bittersweet feeling begins to linger, leaving the player wanting more. Thankfully, Fumito delivers with a post-credit scene long before post-credit scenes were expected and overdone. The player takes control of Iko on a white sandy beach and begins doing what comes as instinct: search for Yorda. To great delight, the player is rewarded for the efforts with one last glimpse of Yorda alive and well. I remember finishing Iko and feeling so fulfilled, while also sad to say goodbye to these characters. Every aspect of the game is memorable, 20 years later, and it's still one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. Interestingly, Ueda strikes a balance between hope and despair. Iko can be seen as a coming-of-age story of two youths navigating the struggles of existence. The prison isn't really a prison. Instead, it's a representation of the weight of existing, constantly under pressure of trying to survive everyday struggles and the more crushing moments like the disappointment of failure, or worse, the loss of loved ones. Arthur Schopenhauer, a pessimist philosopher, writes, "In early youth, as we contemplate our coming life, we are like children in a theater before the curtain is raised, sitting there in high spirits and eagerly waiting for the play to begin. It is a blessing that we do not know what is really going to happen. Could we foresee it, there are times when children might seem like innocent prisoners, condemned, not to death, but to life, and as yet all unconscious of what their sentence means." Iko and Yorda escape the castle, but then what? There's still so much left unanswered and uncertain. It's in what is unwritten that Fumito leaves his players to enter the unknown and meditate. In meditation, the player may wonder what is the meaning of life. Perhaps more importantly, Iko may leave some reflecting on and wondering what is in life that has meaning. Love thy neighbor. If something as basic as helping another in need and showing charitable mercy didn't have meaning, then what would be the point of anything? Love for neighbor is not the complete meaning of life for Iko, but it is something that has meaning and is enough to be the foundation of an entire story and fictional world. I played Iko sometime after its release, and definitely before Shadow of the Colossus. And while I was still in high school, so sometime around 2002 or 2003, when Shadow of the Colossus was announced, I was ecstatic. Iko left me craving more of that experience, but I didn't necessarily want a sequel because I couldn't rationally justify how a sequel would fit. Yet I wanted to continue experiencing its world in some capacity. Ueda somehow gave gamers exactly what they wanted. The most insane aspect of Shadow of Colossus being regarded as one of the best video games ever made is that Fumito Ueda simply wanted to make a game for gamers. Crazy, I know.
Look at us. Hey, look at us.
Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
ただワンダはどちらかというともう少しゲーマー寄りで、男の子向けのゲームとしてデザインしているので、だって全般的に言うとどっちでもないんですかね。そのタイトルごとによって違ってます。
So June 2005, I graduated high school, started working, and just started living life. In October 2005, Shadow of the Colossus was released, and I played it at launch. I completed the game, and I'll present my thoughts in just a moment. But a philosophical examination for this game isn't exactly what I want to present. Instead, I want to offer something more personal. Early 2007, one morning, my mother yelled at me to wake me up to take her to a doctor's appointment. I threw on whatever clothes I could find that were the most comfortable yet presentable. I sat in the lobby of the doctor's office while I waited for my mother. Finished with her appointment, she returned to the lobby and motioned me to head towards the elevator to go home. We entered the elevator, and as soon as the doors closed, she turned to me, erupting in tears, and said, "The doctor told me I have cancer." I held her. Looking back at that moment, I remember so viscerally. I mark that point in my existence where everything changed. It's the moment that divided then from now. In December of 2009, I checked on my mother in bed at home, receiving hospice care. She laid in bed facing out towards a window and turned away from everyone. She was so still. Standing over her, I turned her body to look at her warm, vibrant face. Instead, I saw the dull, lifeless stare of my mother's eyes. After her long struggle with cancer, her body was defeated. At 21 years old, I was still playing video games religiously. Days after her passing, I picked up the controller for the first time. I tried playing Far Cry 2, and I remember the feeling of feeling nothing. Weeks passed. Because my father stopped working to take care of my mom, my childhood home of 15 years was foreclosed on. We were allowed to stay there for a while because of my mother's death, but we eventually had to leave. Feeling lost and wanting to run away from my reality, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. With my ship out day months away, I needed a distraction and felt the urge to replay Shadow of the Colossus. It's with this perspective and nearly 2 decades to reflect on the game, as well as the gifted burden of knowing death so intimately, that I write. The emotional depth of Colossus can resonate with anyone, but replaying it after losing someone so close to me added a layer of unwanted understanding. At the game's start, Dormin tells Wander that there will be a heavy price to pay for killing the Colossi, to which Wander replies with piercing determination.
Hola, you do new.
The protagonist of Shadow of the Colossus is instantly distinct from Iko. Wanderer isn't some innocent boy whisked away into imprisonment. Instead, Wanderer is an anti-hero, willing to do what must be done, no matter what. With unrelenting sharpness, he is unwavering in his desire to resurrect his loved one. Again, the central dilemma focuses on a masculine figure's presumed love for a woman. Their relationship also isn't clearly defined and doesn't have to be. Although because of their closeness in age, it can almost certainly be deduced that Mono is not Wander's mother. But alas, that is not the relevant aspect, only that he loves her, and it's his love for her that serves as his hubris. Despite the clear warnings from Dormin that there will be consequences for his actions, he is so blinded by his love and goal to bring her back that his own desire leads him astray. His perceived good of resurrecting her is actually morally evil. In an interview with Wired, Fumito confirms that Shadow of the Colossus is the origin story of the curse of boys born with horns. A quick note from the same interview reveals that giving Ico horns was a design choice to be able to tell characters apart in the development stages. The design choice stuck and made it a part of the story. Going back to the beginning of this video, the irony of making such a detailed examination of Ueda's games is that there truly wasn't an intended meaning. But let's not get fixated on that and just let me live my life. Now, considering that Colossus is connected to Ico, one thing interesting from Wander's conversation with Dormin is that he mentions Mono was sacrificed because it was believed she had a cursed fate. Looking at Ico, we learn that the queen sustained her existence by sacrificing the boys with horns and her daughter Yorda. There's no reason to believe that Yorda was the queen's first and only daughter. The point of mentioning this is that there are many fan theories that believe that Mono is the queen, or at least the ancestor of the line of girls who are sacrificed. For a long time, I dismissed this theory until reviewing the opening. Ueda and his team built the lore of their games on subtext and design by subtraction, basically less is more, or including only what is absolutely necessary. Wander, stating that Mono was sacrificed for having a cursed fate, is the single strongest bit of evidence that suggests Mono is the queen, or the original vessel for the queen. This aspect in Wander having a fatal flaw points to the overall story of Shadow of the Colossus being told in the tradition of ancient Greek tragedies. Like the harrowing tale of Oedipus Rex, where a king attempts to avoid a prophecy that his son will murder him and then the son will marry his mother, only sets the prophecy in motion. By trying to avoid Mono's cursed fate, Lord Aemon set forth a fulfillment of what was prophesied, because the heavy price that Wander must pay is condemning himself and Mono to cursed fates. Understanding and appreciating this raises the quality of Ueda's storytelling prowess to the likes of George Lucas, and the main difference, Lucas tells his stories through exhaustive dialogue and detailed exposition. Ueda tells his stories through gameplay and minimalist strokes that shape the narrative. Reading different theories and interpretations of Dormin, there's an idea that Dormin is not evil. This can be tricky to define, but I'd have to agree. But only through a precise understanding can that statement be true. And this interpretation is what led me to favor the idea that in the universe Ueda created, there exists a benevolent creator. Theologically, Christians believe that all of God's creations are good. An atheist and others would reject this notion of all creation being good because in the world, evil exists. Here is where precise revelations must be made. Evil exists as precipitations of actions made by beings, but evil itself does not exist as an entity possessing its own will or sovereignty equal to God's. Satan, being one of God's creations, is not his equal or even his rival. However, Satan, being one of God's creations, was made good and meant for good. It was the serpent's actions that were evil. Evil is any action that opposes God's will or the right natural order of his created universe. Going back to Wander's first conversation with Dormin, after hearing Wander's request to bring Mono back, Dormin asks, "Souls that are once lost cannot be reclaimed. Is that not the law of mortals?" From this one line of discourse, we learn a great deal about this fictional universe. Firstly, souls exist. In Christian tradition, souls belong to the immaterial world, and it's in the immaterial world where God exists. The only being who has the authority to cross from the immaterial to the material and back is God. When Dormin asks, "Is that not the law of mortals?" this informs the audience that there is a natural order and law of all things in the material world, and if there is a law, then there is a lawmaker, who is, you guessed it, God. As I said in the beginning, I do not think that Ueda directly modeled this God to be the same as the Christian God. However, there are significant similarities. After all, it is also confirmed that Dormin is a biblical reference spelled backwards. Nimrod, the king who commissioned the Tower of Babel. The story of the Tower of Babel can be summarized as man's desire to achieve the status of God. In Shadow of the Colossus, Wander seeks the power of a god to reverse the fate of his beloved at the altar of a tower that stretches to the heavens. So in The Shadow of the Colossus, where is God? Short answer, he's not where they are. But just because something can't be seen doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Although God created the universe and perpetually sustains it, he does not exist physically in it. An artist creates a painting, and that painting contains the identity of the artist, but that painting is not the artist. Existence and everything in it make up the composite that is God's identity. So similarly, in Ueda's universe, God isn't seen, but he is there. Dormin was banished to the cursed lands, and Wander makes the conscious decision to cross the divide from the world of the living to the world of the damned. The bridge is the chasm that separates Dormin from the rest of the world, who is essentially Satan. The most compelling aspect of Shadow of the Colossus is that it's one of the few games that you do not play as the hero of the story. You're not even the main villain. Wander is a pawn that Dormin manipulates, albeit Dormin didn't have to do much coercing, and uses Wander to achieve the end of entering the material world, so he can then leave the cursed lands. After defeating the first Colossus, you, the player, are horrified because you realize that as Wander, you just killed an animal unjustly, and are then corrupted by its essence, which we later find out is a piece of Dormin. The game progresses, beast after beast is slain, all the while your beloved rests so still. As Wander's journey draws closer to its end, he progressively enters a state of deterioration. His appearance becomes dirty and ravaged by his battles, then something more unnerving appears. He grows horns. Finally, after losing his faithful companion Argo and defeating the last Colossus, Wander is reduced to a sad and decrepit state. The game ends with a dramatic sequence of events. Lord Iman and his followers arrive at the altar to stop Wander, but learn that they are too late. While praying over Mono, Wander's zombie body appears and Lord Iman orders one of his men to put an end to his cursed fate. The heartbreaking part is that Wander suffers a death in the same way he slayed the 16 Colossi. Although his execution is deserving, he is in such a pathetic state that you can't help but feel sorrowful in the same way that you first felt after defeating the first Colossus, realizing that, like the Colossi, Wander is nothing but a vessel of use for Dormin. Then the unthinkable happens. Dormin possesses Wander's body and transforms into a shadow Colossus. Lord Iman and his men escape not before throwing the ancient sword into the pool below, opening a portal that pulls Dormin back to whence he came. The direction Ueda executed was flawless. Throughout the drama of Lord Iman battling Dormin, through precise direction, Ueda includes Wander's focus on Mono, with shots focusing on her still lifeless body on the altar. The inclusion of these shots adds layers of horror and tragedy to the chaotic scene. The player is reminded of the life at stake. Oddly, at this moment, the player is given control of Wander's shadowy body that is also being vacuumed into the pool. With this last bit of gameplay, Ueda gives one last tug of emotional heartbreak. Trying to fight, you grab onto the stairs and see Wander's frail body being pulled backwards and realize his fate is inevitable. The only thing you can do is hold on until your energy is depleted and enjoy the last fleeting glimpses of the love you lost, and now realize you'll be separated from her forever. Standing with my family surrounding my mother's casket, I remember staring at her face and understanding that it would be the last time I'd ever see her with my own eyes without having to stare at a photograph frozen in time. Ueda masterfully captured what it feels like to suffer, Now, although Wander is responsible for his own undoing, his last moment reminds the player his intention was just to bring his love back. Shadow of the Colossus story perfectly exhibits what Aristotle wrote over 2,300 years ago, describing the makings of a well-executed tragedy. From section 2 of his Poetics, Aristotle writes, "A perfect tragedy should, as we have seen, be arranged not on the simple but on the complex plan. It should moreover imitate actions which excite pity and fear, this being the distinctive mark of tragic imitation. A well-constructed plot should therefore be single in its issue, rather than double as some maintain. The change of fortune should not be from bad to good, but reversely from good to bad. It should come about as a result not of vice, but of some great error or frailty in a character." Wander possesses excellent qualities, but his actions are misaligned to carry out his own will. He is so enslaved by his suffering that he is willing to betray his nature to do good. Where Ikko's compassion and sacrifice moves him to do good, Wander's focus on the false good of resurrecting Mono leads him to do evil. So considering that Ueda delivered an excellently gripping emotional drama with fun, exciting gameplay, it's no wonder that Shadow of the Colossus stands as one of the greatest games ever made. Wander is consumed by the portal and Lord Emon flees. After crossing the bridge that self-destructs, Lord Emon takes a last look at the cursed lands and laments that he hopes somehow a Redeemer will undo the consequences of Wander's actions. This points to the events of Ikko and nicely ties up the narrative of Shadow of the Colossus as the prequel to Ikko. Ueda again, at the end of Shadow of the Colossus, left me in the throes of existential crisis, feeling so full yet empty. After Colossus, it became apparent that Fumito not only knows how to deliver a top-tier gameplay experience, he knows how to repeat the process in a wholly new and unique way while still maintaining the core elements of the overall feeling he wishes to convey. That dreamlike delirium at the crossroads of fairy tale and nightmare. Alright, you've made it this far, so I'm going to level with you, and hopefully I've established some credibility. Keep that in mind as I ask for your grace. I didn't play The Last Guardian. I had a PS4, I own a digital copy on the PlayStation Store, but I never got around to even booting it up. I procrastinated playing it and found myself in a money pinch, so I had to sell my PS4 to GameStop for 1/4 portion.
What you brought me today is worth 1/4 portion.
And thus never played Fumito's most recent chapter in his abstract trilogy. But thanks to gameplay playthroughs and video essays, I did thorough research in getting to know The Last Guardian. After doing so, I am deeply saddened I've yet to experience it firsthand. Because although The Last Guardian at first appears to be the outlier and most disconnected from the trilogy, it seems to be Ueda's greatest achievement in emotional nuance and subtlety.
Agiane hetiroi yoku. Agatu ian. Ihetu nezuna. Arakulo kutio otiana lisoma kyura letu arake.
Also, post-examination of The Last Guardian, Shadow the Colossus' Wanderer proves to be the true outlier of the game's protagonist, as Guardian features the nameless boy who, like Ico, is an innocent thrown into a towering prison with an unlikely companion, contrasted to Wanderer's wicked goal to defy the natural order of things and resurrect his loved one. Moreover, The Last Guardian's main character arc actually belongs to Trico, that tells a gripping story of redemption from kidnapper to savior. Ico and The Last Guardian both tell stories of triumph and heroism, while Colossus serves as a tragedy. With Guardian, Ueda returns to a HUD-less experience and strips away even more of the player's ability to fight, rendering the boy completely at the mercy of Trico's protection. Relying on Trico to protect you is the genesis of a relationship that serves as the emotional foundation for the entire game. True to Fumito form, Trico isn't the perfect companion. He doesn't always respond right away and is even defiant at times. The journey of mastering Trico is at the heart of the game's experience, which is largely responsible for gamers loving or hating The Last Guardian, as it is Ueda's most polarizing experience thus far. Of Ueda's 3 games, The Last Guardian feels most like an allegory of life and its existential trappings. There's a guardian doing his best to help a child escape the maze-like confines of his boyhood. The pair start at the bottommost point of an inescapable mountain nest and have only the direction to head upwards. The contrast of claustrophobic corridors and open areas with lush environments mimics some of life's rhythms. Moments of constraining anxiety alleviated by brief periods of calmness and clarity. Up and up, the pair climb, making headway while nurturing their bond. One of the most gut-punching moments in the game is when the boy and Trico make significant progress only to come crashing down and land almost back to where they started. It's in these deafening moments of defeat where emotional resonance in Fumito's games takes center stage. The mind wanders and reflects on all the times life put us on the ropes and perhaps knocked us down to the canvas. The unexpected moments of arresting contemplation produce the beauty and horror that gamers react to so strongly. The ending of The Last Guardian mirrors the ending of Shadow of Colossus. Trico escapes the nest with the boy after being ravaged and nearly killed, to then fly far away to return the boy to his home. Trico crash lands with only a shred of life left in him. Much in the same state as Wander, yet differs in that Trico sacrifices himself for the good of saving the boy. Although the ending is bittersweet and offers little justice for Trico's sacrifice, the reward is a heroic tale of conquering evil and seeking the good of love and friendship. The boy has nearly nothing to offer Trico other than kindness. Therefore, Trico's only motive to rescue the boy is because it's just the right thing to do. Why reflect on these games so deeply if their conception wasn't so deep? Because there are truths in the game's real-world likeness of experiencing emotional depth, and that is reason enough for reflection. Reflecting is the means of extracting new knowledge from an experience, and the knowledge that can be derived from these games hold intelligible truths, regardless of their sought ends or simplistic design thread. Apprehended knowledge from fictional experiences is desired in entertainment because it is a good that we seek by our nature to seek higher goods, such as a deeper and truer understanding of the human condition, which is the highest of natural goods that can stand independently from any theistic belief, yet does not at all contradict theism, and that all things of the natural world belong to the greater comprehensive understanding of all existence ordered towards God. So, the atheist and the theist can contemplate the same natural truths, where the former's contemplation ends with nature, the latter's extends with divine revelation. In other words, regardless of your belief or disbelief in God, an objective truth is always a truth, such as 1 + 1 will always equal 2. Finally, we can arrive at the conclusion that although Ueda's games had no intended philosophical inspiration or meaning, doesn't negate that there is meaning. J.R.R. Tolkien famously said that he hated allegory, yet created the greatest allegorical works of fiction. This doesn't make him a liar. The truth is that he set out to create a believable and immersive world based on his own canon of beliefs and principles. So because his world is so believable and relatable, allegorical extractions can be made. In the same way, Fumito Ueda created his own immersive world that is believable and relatable, and achieved this through subtext and minimalism, not to reduce the detail of his world, but instead emphasize their most fundamental characteristics. So although Ueda denies complex meaning, his overall intention was to create a real world. Thus, I urge you not to be quick to dismiss the emotionally complex responses to these games. And because these games elicit such responses in a sophisticated manner, they qualify to be regarded as higher achievements in art. Fumito Ueda is 3 for 3 in delivering a nearly perfect gaming experience. In his next game, what sort of story will we encounter? Will we meet another virtuous hero, or endure a new tragic heartbreak? I cannot wait for what's to come.
If you recall, very swift and much 25 kilometers radius of ground zero now. 60 seconds. 55 seconds. 50 seconds. 45 seconds. 30 seconds. 35 seconds. Start mayhem at 30 seconds. 25 seconds. 20 seconds.